Graphs. This is where everyone has a little bit of a hard time, okay? The interventions is, natural to teachers because you definitely want to give students the interventions they need. But what to do with the data is what everyone usually has a hard time with. Well, I'm going to tell you what to do with that data, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to give and I'm going to use fluency as my example because that's what I use. So for example, you're going to do a baseline, and your baseline could come from the STAR reader test that I mentioned earlier, and also a fluency test that you give the students. Once you determine the average, then you start plotting it into a graph, okay? And the graph, Excel does everything for you. So what you do is you create a baseline. So let's say the student is reading around 17 words correct per minute, okay, at the beginning of the year when you decided to start these interventions. What you do is you plot it, and you put the date. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start providing the student with interventions, okay? And remember, it has to be consistent. The interventions have to be consistent. If not, it does not work, and the data is invalid, okay? So let's say the student receives, 2 to 3 times a week, specific interventions, within their deficit. After that, at the end of the week, you're going to give them a fluency test. You're going to count how many words correct the student read per minute, and you're going to put it into the graph. In addition to having a baseline, you're going to have what the student read, which is the words correct per minute, and you're also going to have a goal that you're going to set for the student. Now, you want to put a goal that's kind of like attainable for them. So I placed a 50% goal because that's also what my class average was. Because you also need to compare to how the students are doing in your classroom too, so that you can also, determine, okay, yeah, this student's way below the rest of the students in my class. So once you have the student goal, I have it set at 50, then you start plotting it in. And then you have to make sure that you place, every week you have the correct date, and every week you're giving the fluency test and you're putting it on there. As you put it into there, you're going to see that your graph is going to show, if the student's making progress. And this is where the collaborative problem solving team comes into play. At the end of all the intervention, which usually takes 6 to 8 weeks, okay? When you're within a tier, like for example, you're in tier 2, you do the interventions for 6 to 8 weeks, and then you review your graph with your collaborative problem solving team. So once you review it with this team, you decide, well, is the student's level of performance okay, let me rephrase this. You're going to have the student performance, and you're going to have the expected level of performance. Now, if the student is not reaching that expected level of performance, or there's too much of a huge gap in between, the two lines, then you have to, definitely increase the frequency of the intervention and the intensity of it. So that's how the graph helps you. And as you take a look at it, you can pretty much figure out how it works. Okay, one more thing. Something that's very important is as you go through the tiers and you discuss the interventions and the progress of the parent's child, what you need to do is you need to have a meeting with the parent, and you need to show them this data too, so that they can be well informed as to whether or not their child is making sufficient progress, or that way they can see why we're moving them on to another tier. Because they can actually take a look and see, the gap between, or they can see the progress where if it got closer to the expected level of performance.
Can you would you mind saying?
Yes.
No. A graph is very easy for a parent to understand. It's not a lot of numbers on a page, but it's actually just
okay.
I know, it's just simple.
So, if you show this graph to the parents, during your meeting, it's a great tool because graphs are easy for parents to read. The numbers are there, they can see, they have a visual, and they can compare too what's expected of their child and how they're performing. There's too much of a up and down, that's too inconsistent. So one thing also when you take a look at the graph is you want to look if you're having a steady increase or there's too much of a zigzag in the line, okay? That kind of tells you that there's inconsistencies in the student. And that's another red flag that, you might need to definitely increase the interventions.
So you want to see, and can I get you to say this, you want to see an upward trajectory?
Yes, trajectory.
So do you
okay.
want to say?
So the goal is when you're doing these interventions and you're looking at your graphs and your progress monitoring, the goal is to to see the trajectory line kind of coming closer and closer to the expected level of performance.
A student-led classroom is a classroom where the students are the ones in charge. It's not a classroom where the teacher is standing and giving instruction. And so if you break kids into centers by strengths and weaknesses, or even likes and dislikes, you can really attack the kids' learning style, and you can, by doing so, you end up having fewer classroom management issues because the kids are on task doing something they enjoy.